Greetings, Mind Crafters, and welcome to another exciting Minecraft episode on this glorious day. It is beautiful here in Vermont. It's very contemplative. October day. These are filmed usually a couple weeks out, so it seems like it's like if you know George Winston, it just you can feel. If you ever listened to him, it's like a George Winston CD is just playing in the woods. It's all the leaves are on the downswing and they're landing on the ground, and of course autumn is a season that definitely reminds us that change is beautiful. Change can be beautiful. And also by the time, the leaves they shake off the leaves and they gently sort of float and land to the ground. Then fall also, reminds us that change is not only beautiful or can be beautiful, but it's also inevitable. So here we go with this. What I like to talk about today is how to rise, how to rise above the pain caused by toxic people. And I was inspired. I was listening to Tony Robbins. I forget when it was. It was fairly recently. He's another one of my friends' group. Oprah and I. She's a big fan of him too. And he's got a lot of wisdom. Tony Robbins does, and just like my dear friend Oprah, she's not aware, but we're very tight. He also walks the talk. Tony Robbins, lives and breathes what he said, which is, I think obviously makes somebody way more credible and, when that authenticity just oozes out of them. So anyway, he was talking about this very thing because he had a very different childhood. Also, I did myself, and a lot of people out there have. We all have stories, right? He talks about having four different fathers and his mom. He says it without denigrating her at all. He just like kind of like I did recently, or I've actually done in a bunch of episodes talking about it in a way that the reason I do these podcasts is to share with people, just like people shared with me all along my own journey, my own path. Not to put anybody down, not to blame. I'm way past that. Tony Robbins sounds way past that himself. When he talks, it just comes right from his heart. It's not about that. It's about sharing so that to help other people, along their journey. And I'm very grateful that people were vulnerable and honest with me and sharing different pieces of their own journeys because wherever it was along the way, it was they were nuggets I needed to hear and very validating and stuff like that. So anyway, Tony was talking about if you sort of continue to drive forward while being guided by your rear view mirror, that ain't going to work out too well. Obviously you're not getting a very clear picture of the ride. It's very going to be very distorted. You're going to completely miss what's in front of you, which is, we're talking about the present moment, being mindful, being actively engaged in our life minutes because our life minutes are so incredibly valuable. The most precious commodity, and the word commodity is strange to use there, but I can't think of another one that we have because there isn't a word you can strap on to life minutes that would describe their value. And often we kind of crank along, not always consciously aware that our life minutes are limited. So when we're kind of wasting them, and the word is waste, looking through the lens of the rear view mirror, it's just those life minutes are circling the drain. Plus, again, we're missing what's in front of us, which is the whole point. So Tony talks about, and lots of people have talked about this. Dr. Jakes does a really good job on this. Your past history is not your destiny. And Dr. Jakes, talks about that a lot. He's a good friend of Oprah. And he talks about when we get wrapped up in the past, when we let ourselves get wrapped up in what's in the rearview mirror, this is at the expense of our destiny. In other words, we cannot become and fulfill who we are destined to be when we're living in a place that's not in the moment. It's neurologically, emotionally, spiritually impossible to do so. And Tony says some super good things, and I think it was a podcast, might even been one of his. I don't know. I was listening to him anyway about a week ago, I think maybe, and he talks about, again, he's so positive. Any of you have ever listened to him? He's so positive, and while also acknowledging, his own, the turbulence in his childhood, and share some different stories. So he talks about the only limit to your happiness, the only limit to your happiness being your growth. He says, if you're not happy, it's because you're not growing. If you're not happy, it's because you're not growing. And he talks about how, personal freedom, maybe spiritual freedom, emotional freedom, comes from growth. We can't control everything. In fact, we can't control most things. I know Wayne Dyer talks about that. It's all an illusion. The fact that we can control things, we can't control what's happening outside of us, especially as children. So all we can really do is control how we think about what's happening on the outside of us, or if it's the past tense, what happened to us. Look through a new frame, a new lens, and sort of just like you would dump pasta into a colander kind of thing. Let all the water out the bottom. That's all. Let's just say all the past stuff out the bottom, and then filter out the meaning of what happened, because we also don't, in addition to not getting away by trying to control things, it just doesn't work. I mean, it's just exhausting is all it is. We're much better off kind of letting go, surrendering, and letting things unfold, letting our life unfold the way it's meant to. And also, we don't get anywhere by blaming people. It just keeps all that stuff alive. So if you've heard out in the world, don't give energy to it. People say that. Don't give energy to it. Don't put it out there. People say that too. They're right. Because the more energy we give to a conflict or a toxic person, or maybe a person who's not technically toxic, who's just challenging, because they are not the same. None of us are perfect, and we all can be annoying at times, and we can be prickly at times, and we can be hurtful at times, and in a regular way, that's just called being human. When it's toxic, it's more severe. Obviously still human, but it's more severe. The toxics are the spiritual and the emotional equivalent of drinking turpentine for breakfast instead of orange juice. They're not their behavior is so extreme, hateful, and um, kind of out to take you down and not going to change. And all about it all. The manipulation, gaslighting. These are typically your narcissists, but of course not everybody. Usually have or it's usually they're dealing with something in that family. Usually, but they're the people who are just out to just to destroy you emotionally and spiritually. And that gaslighting is really the word for that. When they gaslighting, of course, maybe for some of you who don't know, is when somebody in a very manipulated way, it's usually very subtle actually, will get you to think you're the one with the problem, and get you to challenge your own reality. That's what the real definition is. Like, that didn't happen. You didn't really see me do something to somebody over there. Are you sure you weren't tired? That's kind of a really dumb example. But they're super subtle, and people can really end up in a very bad place, staying in a relationship with narcissists for sure. I mean, any relationship. I didn't even mean to insinuate romantic. Any in any kind of way, friend, or you're the child of a narcissistic person or whatever. And again, that's not the only way to be toxic. We're talking, behavior is toxic. It might be addictive behavior, it can be all different kinds of things. But anyway, Tony says freedom comes from growth, not control, because we can't control everything. We don't get anywhere by blaming people. But the situation with a toxic individual, you may need to just step out of the current, and I want to say break up with them. I don't mean just romantic people. If you're an adult and it's your parent and you think, oh, I have to with your parent. No, you don't. Not if they're toxic. You can release them like a helium balloon. So he says, when you become stronger than whatever's going on in your rearview mirror, then you are free. Let's say that again. When you become stronger than whatever's going on in your rearview mirror, then you are free. And I just have to say that. And I know there's so much. Our family's Catholic, actually, and there's a lot of that honor thy mother and father. And I would say, yes, that's great the majority of the time, unless they're toxic, because all that is, and they'll use it, is something to keep us in their grip, so they can control and manipulate us like a marionette and cause spiritual and emotional mental damage. So, to me, in my world, um, trust has to be earned, even if it's your parents. Honor has to be earned, even if it's your parents. And if they're so far extreme that they are emotional poison, then as in they're just going to keep up, you keep all the just doing all that behavior to keep bringing you down, then it may be time to set them free. Because if you're going to continue to be damaged by it, there isn't really much of a point in that, and we can't change anybody. That's like the 11th commandment. So I just I he Tony was talking about his mom, actually, with her addiction to alcohol, and I think he said pills got in there, and he was saying how she was this really wonderful person until all that started happening. And then he also did the disclaimer, like I did earlier, that he wasn't sharing it with all of us to be denigrating. He was just sharing it to say that you can grow from it, and you can release it, and you can come out on top from it. And this is absolutely true, because really, and Wayne Dyer says this, we're all moving around doing behavior. We're behaving. All of us are behaving all day long, and we are producing results, right? Some of the results work for us, some not so much, but no matter what, they're pointing us in a different direction. So it's important for us to remember that too. So I just had this thought when he was talking about his mother. I thought of this right afterwards, that if my mother had been a good, loving mother, and we're not talking about perfect because nobody is, right? The good enough mother, like Donald Winnicott talked about back around circa 1950-ish. Now today's times we would say good enough parent, to be all inclusive. But if she had been capable of that, which she just wasn't, and had she been the mother I'd wanted and needed her to be, had she been capable of loving me as a child, I would not be the strong, sort of confident, authentic, empathetic woman I am today. I mean, that's just the truth. And would I want to relive it? Absolutely not. Especially as a child, to be dependent on a sick person when you're a child is really, really, really challenging. You don't have any money. When you're 5 years old, you can't just get in a car and drive away. You usually can't say anything because you sort of sense that your very survival is dependent upon this sick person. You're not having all that language going on when you're 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, right? You just sort of know it. So you learn to navigate. You learn to navigate how to get the good feels. And that's, sort of the beginning of what, that starts to shape us, and all different types of behaviors can come together in order to, for survival purposes. And anyway, so especially also in an addicted home, because there was a whole lot of narcissistic behavior, a lot of bipolar behavior, and addicted. There was also an addiction present in my home too. So I learned early on, to get it done for myself. I did, and it's interesting because, as you know, I'm a card carrying member of the Fast Mind Club, and I wouldn't change a thing about my mind. I love my wild and wonderful mind. Also grateful for the folks, especially one, Dr. Dave, I love him so much, who early on back at St. Mike's got me to see how amazing my mind was, because up until then it had been a lot of negative. And I learned. I lost myself there. I didn't lose myself. I lost my train of thought. Is what I meant to say. I learned to get it done by myself. I know what I was saying. Even with my fast mind, when I'm saying I learned to get it done myself, the procrastination is the only symptom I don't have of the Fast Mind Club. And I chalk that up to this: growing up in an addicted home with narcissism going on and bipolar stuff going on, and lots of mania and lots of unpredictability and lots of not lots of violence, frequent enough violence. Let's just say that. So I don't want to exaggerate. There was violence in my household. There was hitting and verbal abuse, and laundry thrown out in the yard, and kids thrown against walls and things like that. And I just sort of learned to be resilient and shift my mindset when things got loud and crazy in the house, like, and when the laundry being thrown out in the front yard in a neighborhood, a New York neighborhood, just about an hour out of Manhattan. The police occasionally showing up at night, mania, these manic, high velocity rides in the car, 100 miles an hour. I remember looking over the speedometer; it was past that. I couldn't see how far past that. Just a lot of really, I know we don't like to use the word crazy, but that's exactly what it was. It was very out of control, crazy behavior. And I learned, with all that extreme stuff going on, I learned how to remain calm. I learned how to remain calm, and I learned how to sort of be in the eye of the storm, if that makes sense. Not that there weren't plenty of times where you know, where I wasn't, I remember I was like 8 years old once when the police came to the door. I remember just looking out the crack in my bedroom door, just kind of watching, didn't really know what to do. And I just kind of learned. And we lived in this small 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood. My very best friend, my rooftop friend, who, if any of you've heard me talk about her before, she had stuff going on in her house too. We used to climb up the trellis to the roof. We were little, like 6, 7, 8 years old. And we used to sit up there and just talk about it and look out over the Catskill Mountains, and that's it. I learned how to cope with stuff younger. And I think that's not so bad. In fact, I think that's good. Again, do I want to relive it? No. However, to learn to build those coping skills early on was really a good thing. Really, really a good thing. I also learned how to seek higher ground. I learned how to seek higher ground by, again, well, the rooftop thing. That's where she got her name. And also, we didn't say all this in the article, that 7 days article, but we used to go up to the apple orchard too. There was an apple orchard sort of at the edge of our neighborhood, and we used to just go sit up there. We were such spiritual little creatures, and we didn't think of it when we were little. We thought everybody was like that, and maybe they are. I don't know, but we used to talk about really deep stuff so much younger. And when you look back at the experiences, yeah, the manic ride. There was one particular manic ride to the Bronx. It was probably the worst ever. Definitely wouldn't want to relive that one. But when you look back, like, it was all for a reason. Life unfolds the way it's meant to unfold. And though I wouldn't want to relive it, I'm absolutely grateful. I'm absolutely grateful for the growth that came out of it. And so now, in fact, I was just having this chat with my Minecrafters, I think Thursday. Not about all this stuff, not about all this stuff, but just adversity in general, because the Gen Zs often have the bar set at no stress. They just think that if there's any stress, something's wrong. And that's not true. The only people who don't have problems are dead, if you look at it that way. So I kind of explained to them how I phrase it is when contrast presents itself, that's why I watch their eyes get big. When contrast presents itself, I kind of I do the eye of the storm thing as much as possible and just realize that all this is happening for a reason. So, and I told them, and again, it's a tough sell when you're in the mud for sure. Though when we look back, the dots connect. The dots all connect. So I talk about navigating contrast and also trying to shift out of thinking that that thought pattern of life happening to us. Life doesn't happen to us. Life happens for us. So sometimes people get into, oh, how come this is happening to me? How come it's happening to me? How come it's happening to me? It's not happening to you. It's happening for you. Again, tough sell when we're in it, and I'm not saying it isn't. When I look back at all those childhood experiences, the growth, the connection, the angel network that I ended up that the angels in my life are absolutely, so I'm saying are present tense because the high majority of them are still in it, and the ones who are on this earth are still with me anyway. And I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change a thing. And so how to rise above the pain with it has a whole lot to do with reframing. It's one of the best skills anyone could possibly learn.